It was an old house. It was beautiful, both inside and out. The environment was peaceful, and the war had not disturbed it yet. And it was on a warm summer night, while everyone in the upstairs bedrooms were sleeping, that someone knocked at those bedrooms' doors. The tired 50-year-old man unwillingly arose. His wife complained of chest pain and just wanted to stay in bed, but the knocking became persistent, and the voice behind the door sounded familiar. The man slipped on the carpet and swore.
Desktop juga.
For the last 2 months, they had been accustomed to the electricity outages. But walking inside the dark house was not easy anyway. Finally, his fingers found the door handle. Candlelight cut through the darkness. The woman sighed hard and covered her head with the blanket to hide from the light. It was their doctor. His hands were shaking a bit. He actually looked sick himself. Now, he was aware of his kidney disease, but there was no way to find the required drugs anymore. The doctor asked the man to get dressed and follow him. Other voices sounded in the hallway, but the words were not clear. The woman was told to get up too. The doctor told the couple they needed to take a photo. That sounded rather strange at midnight, but this time the request did not surprise the couple. They even felt some relief because finally things appeared to be moving forward, and they were accustomed to photographs. They hadn't received any newspapers or any news of any kind for several weeks now. The only thing they knew was that the war continued. But nobody had told them about the Czech regiments approaching from the east. Meanwhile, the woman's cousin led the troops who advanced from the west. But they were too far away. She was no longer dreaming of the luxurious life they had before, but hoping only to get to her cousin, even though they didn't get along. For the last 4 years, her husband had called her cousin an enemy. But now there were not many choices left. And so they felt that this was one step forward. Their worried children were being noisy in the other bedroom. The girls did dress up beautifully and comb their long hair so that they would look well and beautiful for the photographs. Their teenage son, however, was the biggest problem. A genetic disease had made him almost disabled. He could hardly get up on his own. His moans were so loud some nights that nobody in the house slept well for many nights in a row. Even the doctor wasn't able to relieve the boy's pain. The man's wife did not look very healthy. She had made a home remedy potion which actually worked in just the opposite way that it was supposed to. Her shaking hands held the diary with the swastika on its cover, and it fell to the floor. Her eyes stopped on the last entry. June 16th, 1918. Leo, the boy who helped us with cooking, suddenly left the house right before dinner. We are wondering if the fates will let us see him again. The good news was what they finally brought the eggs, recommended by the doctor, for our suffering son. All of a sudden there was a rush downstairs, and the maid asked for permission to come in. Someone had told her that they would have to leave the house right after the photography session. The woman allowed the maid to pack their clothes and with an unsteady gait went to the wardrobe. The dress had not been washed for a while, but she put it on anyway. It was heavy, but it was the best way to transport the jewels, which had been safely sewn into the dress, just as they had been sewn into the dresses of her daughters. At 1:30 a.m., a truck with metal-sounding noises approached the house gates and stopped. The doctor came back upstairs and politely asked the family to hurry. He said the people were waiting for them now. But those men had to wait 1 more hour till the family, the woman, her husband, their son and 4 daughters, were finally dressed and had packed their bags. The doctor, the maid, and their cook accompanied the family downstairs. The electricity was already back by that time. The teenager was not able to take a step, and his tired father had to carry him, risking a fall down the steep wooden stairs. A disgusting-looking man met them on the first floor and showed them into a room where the photography session was to take place. It was a small room, connected to another small room through one door, and the other door opened to the hall where the family entered. The only window had been painted white. But all the windows in the house had been painted white about a month before that. The time was not a peaceful time, and they were painted to avoid curious eyes from the outside. The woman asked them to bring a chair for their sick son, who could not even stand. She herself felt sick and stressed as well, so another chair was brought for her. The disgusting man heard a quiet "Spasiba" or "thank you" from her. She sat down beside her son. The husband stood between them. The girls with the doctor, the maid, the cook, and another servant occupied space behind the chairs. Everyone got prepared for the photo session. However, they did notice that, strangely, there was not a photo camera anywhere. Suddenly, the nervous doctor sighed and whispered that they were actually not going to ride anywhere after the session. The man with the disgusting face took out a paper and read the text quickly. No one in the family had enough time to realize what was actually said. As the paper was put away, bullets tore through the silence. The woman's husband tried to ask what was going on, but was killed in the next moment. His wife also died quickly, the bullet striking her right in the mouth, while she was screaming in terror and in tears. For the victims who had not died immediately, the hardest minutes lay ahead. The injured girls screamed and tried to hold each other. Some of the bullets bounced off their dresses as they were hit. One of the girls was holding her dog in her arms when the men started firing their guns. The dog died in her arms. The boy was still moaning. He was lying down with his face turned toward the floor. He died sooner than his sisters, since he had no ability to resist at all. The maid was in shock. Her wounds were not serious, and she tried to stand up right in front of the 12 men with their guns. The bullets did not actually finish the ordeal as fast as the murderers expected. So they took out their bayonets. But even those were not so deadly at first. The jewels hidden under the women's clothes protected their bodies against its strikes. For a while. One of the murderers later said that the bayonets were also not really sharp enough to finish the job quickly. The men had to strike their victims again and again, making the doomed children and the servants suffer even more. When one of the men began striking the maid with the bayonet, she used all the power she had to struggle. She held the bayonet's handle, trying to keep her chest away from the blade, and that was her last desperate attempt to save her life. Finally, she fell down on the floor among the other bleeding bodies. The bayonet pierced her body several times, finally sticking into the wooden floor under her back. Nobody counted the number of shots fired. Portions of the wall was destroyed after the intensive shooting. Nobody counted the number of bayonet stabs either. One of the other family dogs kept howling in the garden, wanting for someone to let him in. And he too was silenced. The only survivor of that horrible night was the boy's Cocker Spaniel called Joy. He was rescued by a man who immigrated a few months later to Great Britain and took the dog with him. King George V let the dog live in the palace since the murdered owner was his relative. As I'm sure you've figured out by now, this is the story of the final hours of the last royal family in Russian history. Tsar Nicholas II, his wife, the Empress Alexandra, their son Alexei, daughters Tatiana, Olga, Maria, Anastasia, were murdered between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning of July 17, 1918. The 4 servants shared their fate. The decision to kill the entire family was a decision taken by the Bolsheviks in Yekaterinburg, Russia. There is no longer any doubt that any of the family survived. DNA evidence has confirmed their remains. The 100-year-old house became a government office and later a museum. KGB reports indicate it was demolished in 1977 because it attracted too many tourists and candle-carrying religious people. However, in the year 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church declared the family were holy saints. And 3 years later, in 2003, erected a beautiful church over the site where the house once stood. Thank you for joining us on this sad historical journey.
Ooh.